Canada is sending a third shipment of lethal aid to Ukraine to help it fend off Russia. This latest shipment includes anti-tank weapon systems and upgraded ammunition. Canada is also banning oil imports from Russia, the Prime Minister is announcing, and the federal government is asking Canada's broadcast regulator, the CRTC, to consider removing Russia Today from Canada's airwaves. Moscow is intensifying its assault on Kyiv, though, forcing residents back into shelters. Andrey Shevchenko served as Ukrainian ambassador to Canada from 2015 to 2021. He's currently in an underground shelter in Kyiv, Ukraine. Mr. Shevchenko, thank you very much for making the time for our program. First off, just how are you?
Well, thanks for having me, Vashi. Yes, I am in this underground shelter. We just had another airstrike siren, and it's fifth in the last several hours. And behind me, you can see actually the shelter where now Ukrainian TV channels are broadcasting from. So that pretty much gives you the mood here on the ground. This shelling started immediately after the end of these so-called peace talks between Ukraine and Russia, and that tells you a lot about the true intentions of the Russians. But again, people are very strong, very confident here on the ground.
Tell me what is underpinning that confidence, that strength?
I think people here really feel that it's about the future of this nation. It's an existential threat, and it's up to us to defend us. And I think we feel very strong on the ground when it's the airstrikes that are really, really terrible and that are really heartbreaking.
Let me ask you about those airstrikes, because I think that's where the ask of Western countries come in. We've spoken to a number of guests. We've heard President Zelensky, for example, talk about asking that the airspace be shut down over Ukraine. So far, I listened to, for example, the U.S. State Department spokesperson today say no. We've heard others say, hedge their bets on that. No, nobody's coming out clearly and saying that's something they're willing to do at this point. What would you say to them?
Well, let me explain how this works. We see that Russia increasingly targets civilian infrastructure, including kindergartens, schools, power stations. This morning, they deliberately hit an apartment block in Kharkiv, which is a huge city in the east of Ukraine. And they used a cluster bomb, which is prohibited by the international conventions. Just a couple of hours ago, they attacked and destroyed several five-story apartment buildings in the suburbs of Kyiv. So that's the war that Putin is waging against Ukraine. That's why we are asking for this no-fly zone. And we know it's a big ask, but this is the only way how we can stop this just mass killing of civilians on the Ukrainian soil.
What do you think of the fact that leaders are right now saying no to that?
Well, again, we understand it's a big ask, but there are many things which we couldn't imagine happening just a couple of years ago, just a couple of months ago. But we see that now the West and all our partners in the free world have come to understanding that this is the way to move forward. We believe they will hear us with this again. And I can just give you another example. You know that Ukraine owns this biggest civilian cargo airplane in the world, which is called Antonov 225. It actually brought a lot of medical equipment to Canada, to Toronto and Montreal in the first weeks of the coronavirus. 2 days ago, this huge, wonderful civilian airplane was specifically targeted and destroyed by the Russians. In Ukrainian, it's called a dream. That's the name of the plane. They are trying to kill our dreams. They are trying to kill our civilian infrastructure and people, and we must stop that.
You spent 6 years here in Canada. You heard, I think just before I introduced you, the latest announcement from the Prime Minister, more lethal aid, a ban on Russian oil imports. Obviously, that follows a long list of sanctions that were brought forth last week against Russia from the Canadian government and its allies. Specifically where Canada is concerned, is there something more that you are looking for? And do you think that the Canadian government should expel the Russian ambassador?
Yes, Canada has done a lot of right things, and yes, there are more things to be done. I should tell you that Canada, we have been in very close communication between our countries prior to introduces these sanctions, and I know that Canada has been very efficient in its communication with other allies in the free world. So please continue doing so. We ask for three things: weapons, sanctions, and money. We need weapons to survive, to protect our people right now, to survive in this terrible war. We need money to move forward, and we need sanctions to make the Russians pay a very high economic price. And yes, do kick out Russian ambassador, and yes, do kick out Russian diplomats. It's not about diplomacy anymore.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you because essentially, I think from what I've heard from various ministers who answer that question is that that line of communication it should be open so that the messages that Canada is trying to send to Putin, such as this is not allowable, you don't think so?
Bashi, well, every diplomat will explain that even when you close diplomatic relations, there are ways to communicate. You always have a Swiss embassy. You always have some other ways. But your signal and your message to Russia should be very clear. So again, I'll tell you, this is the time to break all sorts of ties with this regime, which is a clear threat to its neighbors, and you're one of Russia's neighbors. It's a clear threat to the world. It's no time to have measures.
What is your, or can you help us get a sense of, on the ground, I guess, what we have been reading a lot of analysis about, that the Ukrainians have put up much more of a fight than Putin would have expected. Do you think that's a fair assessment? And how does that translate to where you are? Like, what are you seeing among your fellow countrymen and women?
Masha, that is really extraordinary. When I look at people around me, there is so much courage through self-sacrifice. There is so much enthusiasm and optimism. It's very touching and it's extraordinary. And I think it's something which now energizes the whole world. And I think in many senses, many Western governments have changed their decisions and their approach to Ukraine because of this. They see how people on the ground react. They see this true courage and heroism of Ukrainian warriors. And they see how Ukraine has been consolidated to fight for our freedom and for our democracy. It's very inspiring. I'm so proud of my people. And I think everyone and anyone in the world who cares about the future should be proud of them.
You're in Kyiv. We know that that's, ultimately one of the places that Russia wants to take, that the assault on there is very intense. Are you afraid?
That's not the feeling. I think everyone is very focused. I think everyone is very concentrated on what he or she can do, and everyone finds his or her way to help us to protect our country. And there is a huge movement of volunteers who help the armed forces. There are a lot of people who do their job just spreading the news or talking to people around the world. So everyone finds what he or she can do under these circumstances. It's not about fear. I think it's more about our fury, and it's more about our hope for the future.
Okay, Mr. Shevchenko, I'm going to leave it there. I really appreciate you making the time for our program. I hope you stay safe, and all the best to you and your family. Thank you.
Thank you, Vashi.
Andrey. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.